business portion of our meeting back into order. We have concluded executive session with no action to report. And so now we're going to go into the business portion, which starts with our pledge, and that will be Jack, can you lead us, and you can use the backdrop that Ms. Felice
Sure.
put up. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And next is, I'm going to call on Dr. Gianni to preside over a moment of silence for a student from the high school. And I think you have some words to say.
Yes, thank you, President Hayes. It's with sadness that I inform our community of the passing of one of our students, Lucia Paulina Tavera. Lucia fought a lifelong battle with cancer. She was actually new to our district this September. However, she had an immediate impact on all of those that she came in contact with her positive, optimistic spirit, which was both contagious and heroic. I ask the board and those in the community to please take a moment of silence for Lucia.
Thank you for that. We would send, our thoughts and our prayers to the family and, to all of those who mourn her death. Okay. I'm moving.
I'm going into my
next. I'm supposed to tell you how to get out of the building. For those of you in the building, follow the signs. Everybody else, just make sure you're safe and don't smoke. It's a smoke-free school district. We're going to change the order of our agenda to do the business items first, because and after that we will do the budget presentation. So I'm going to attempt to call an omnibus motion to approve items C1 through C3, F2 through F5, G1 through G2, H1 through H7, and I1 through I9. Is there a motion to do that? Ms. Ancona, second by Ms. Felice. Questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? I've got unanimous hands raised. And I think our clerk needs to note that Melissa Aruda had to leave the meeting for some issues at home. So
I will do that. Thank you.
we've got all six remaining members have approved those business items. Next.
So first, President Hayes, I want to compliment you. That was flawless. The way you did all of those items in one shot without any need for correction.
We do that every meeting.
But I do want to also suggest that the board may want to act. There's another action item, the district emergency plan. It's item 2 for discussion. I don't know if you want to also take that out of order and do that now.
Why don't we do that? Is that okay, Ms. Felice? Or
I just had a question on that. We only just got that document, and I have to admit it's about a 30-page document. I didn't read it, and then we got the addendum, which was another 6. Is there a deadline on?
So yes, but the 30-page document is already approved. You approved that in the beginning of the year. The only
Okay.
thing you're approving is the addendum, and it's a result of the law that was passed by the governor, chapter 168 of the laws of 2020.
And we only just got that today, wasn't it?
No, the addendum was in there Thursday.
Then I missed it. I apologize. If the rest of the board is comfortable with voting for it, then
What's the deadline, Dr. Gianni?
That, I believe that needs to be done this meeting. I believe it does.
I think it's April 1st.
April 1st,
It's our
All
last-
around the corner.
it's our last meeting.
I'll take a look.
It really is,
didn't read it.
really the requirements as a result of going into pandemic. It's something that needed to be involved with our unions. Our unions did look at it and review it. A Health and Safety Committee also reviewed it and approved it. So it's not something that, while it's new to the whole entire board, it's not new to those who looked and reviewed it and approved it already.
All right, let me pull it up and you can take the vote. Go ahead.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions about approving item? That would be F2.
Yes.
And no questions or discussion. Okay, so is there a motion to approve F2? Mr. Trent, second by Mr. Pacini, all in favor? You know what? Hold on a minute. You gave me all the kudos, and I think technically it wasn't perfect because I had F2 already in there in the omnibus one.
Mhm. You did?
I think so. That's on my list, F2 through 5.
Okay, well,
Miss Flynn,
Yes, you said F2 through 5.
Yeah, I had that too, yeah.
we already did it.
never mind.
We'll just rewind this tape a little bit for all of us. I think we've got all the business things now out of the way, except for the budget presentation. Does that look right? With the exception of we normally get your report.
Ready.
And do you want to go ahead and do that before we do the presentation?
I certainly do. Thank you. So last night I attended Bellport High School's Evening of Excellence, which was held as a virtual event. I know most of you were watching that last night. For those of you that are not familiar with the Evening of Excellence, it is just that, an Evening of Excellence, where we honor 72 distinguished seniors along with teachers they selected from each of our schools as being most inspiring and influential during their educational career. So in case you did miss it, this wonderful event was recorded and available on our website. In fact, if you did watch it live, I suggest you watch it again, because unfortunately, due to a technical difficulty last night, we were not able to include the honored teacher portion of the program. That piece has been added, and I believe it's been posted to the video on the website. Those honored teachers are Alan Kupperman, Lek Natzabaum, Joe Tator, Henry Finnegan, Trish Barkowitz, and Bill Champlin. So congratulations to those teachers. And in the interest of time, I am not going to announce the 72 seniors, but I do encourage you to watch the video. Congratulations to all honored, as well as those who put the event together. Clearly, Mr. Hogan and his team, along with Amy Ilucci and Amy Krawitz, teachers who put the production together. Next, in preparation of the 2021-22 school year, we are forming 2 committees to review and examine remote teaching and learning and what that might look like for the coming school year. We are creating 2 committees of teachers and parents, one for elementary, one for secondary. Notice went out requesting volunteers to serve on these committees with a deadline of Friday. So if you are interested and not replied to that email or letter, please do so if you want to participate. Next, the Suffolk County Department of Health is continuing their support of schools with the vaccination of employees. The department has requested a count of the number of faculty and staff who have not yet received a COVID-19 vaccine appointment and may still be interested in scheduling one. If you are a district employee and are interested in scheduling an appointment, please simply reply yes to the email we sent to you yesterday. No further information is needed at this time, and we'll wait to hear from the county once we do report the total number of those interested. For the community's information, as of yesterday, we have 92 faculty or staff and 256 student total COVID-19 positive cases reported to the district. Remind you, that's total COVID positive report to the district, not current COVID positive, the total. With regard to our current quarantine, also as of yesterday, we currently have 4 faculty or staff and 65 students in quarantine as a result of close contact at school. And that is all the announcements I have. President Hayes, I turn it back to you.
Can I ask a quick question on
Sure.
the numbers? And I know this, but I want to ask it one more time. Is the close contact rules by DOH the same for inside and outside?
What do you mean inside and outside? Outdoors?
Inside the building,
Yeah.
inside or indoors or outdoors?
Yes.
So
yes.
they are the same, right? The 6 feet and everything else. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. I think next we have trustee and advisory committee reports. Mr. Trent? Nothing. Ms. Felice?
Just quickly, I was able to witness the spectator and our members of the school community to witness our football game and our soccer games this weekend. I just want to say, I thought the students were really just really full of pride, was able to be together again and be able to compete like we want to see them do. The cheerleading squad was there, the dance squad was there. I just can't tell you the warm feeling that I get every time I attend an event at the school. You know, teachers appreciate it, administrators appreciate it when board members go to support their efforts, and the students appreciate it. And that's ultimately what we're there for. And I was very, very happy to witness such a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Also, legislative committee, Chris will give the full report on that, but we goals, and I think that went over very well. And then today attended along as with the board president and our superintendent, attended from the NYRIS, the New York School of Insurance reciprocal for mandatory reporting on child abuse. Quite an eye opener there, and I appreciate the board permitting us to attend those trainings that are necessary in building us in responsibility in the roles we carry. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Parker?
Actually, I have nothing to report. However, I just want to comment. We had 2 great meetings. One was with the legislative committee, where we had Assemblyman DeStefano and Senator White. And I'm sure Mr. Piccini will want to discuss that a little bit later. And obviously, the budget meeting will have a report from our, what is she? Miss Costa.
Assistant
Yeah.
Superintendent.
Assistant Superintendent.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Ms. Ancona? You're having
Yeah,
technical problems. I'll go on to Mr. Piccini while you sort it out.
Thank you. Yeah, as was mentioned, the legislative committee met on Monday. We had a Zoom meeting with newly elected Senator Wyke and Assemblyman DeStefano. I appreciate the committee and everybody's hard work in getting that together. It was kind of last minute. We did have to work off of their schedule, so we had to shuffle around the audit committee meeting, and everybody kind of had to scramble and move things around based on their schedules, because it is late in the budget process, and we didn't want to miss the opportunity to speak to them and just really educate them on some of the things that are happening here in South Country, and list for them what our legislative committee's priorities are. Just to briefly reiterate, it was reliable revenues, technology help, social emotional learning, and healthy food and nutrition for our students. So we were able to take them through that. Ms. Costa put together an excellent presentation that was, I think, very informative. The board did receive a copy of it. If you didn't see the email, please let me know, but I did send it shortly thereafter so everybody can have that information. And I think it was good. I think it was eye-opening for them. I found them both to be, as supportive as they can be in this part of the process. And really, I think for me, the goal, and I think we started that, at least the beginning portions of it, was to just create a partnership with them, and educate them on how unique we are and how we have, a unique set of circumstances and needs compared to some of our neighbors. And really just not seem like beggars with hat in hand every time we speak to them. We want to understand that funding is a big part of the problem. We don't want to just ask for it. We want them to understand why we need it. One of the statistics that came out of that presentation, which, surprises me, but it doesn't surprise me, I guess it surprised me it was that high, was that our English language learner population has increased by 141% over the last 10 years. And that's a lot of money to educate folks who aren't English speakers. And I think we've experienced that, and obviously having the magnet school helps and everything else, but it's expensive, and we're going to need their help with that. In addition to the other stat I found extraordinary was our free and reduced lunch students has increased 71% over the last 10 years, and that is pre-pandemic numbers. So we can assume that it will jump a bit more this year. And I think, again, every district has their unique issues, and I think that is a part of it. As it's a blessing to have those students here, we're going to need some funding to help educate them properly. So I don't know if anybody else on the committee felt differently than I did, but I felt like they were both very receptive to our needs, and the beginning of a good relationship has started. So I don't think I missed anything. But go ahead, Cameron. Do you have a question for me?
Jimmy, you talked about a PowerPoint. Is it possible that I could get a copy of that?
I sent it to all the board members after that meeting. If you didn't get it, I'll resend it to you, but it went to all board members Monday night after the meeting.
All right, I'll take a look at that. Thank you.
Yep. And that's it. That's all I got.
Okay.
And if anybody has questions about comments or anything from both legislators, please feel free.
And Ms. Ancona, are you back?
Yep, I'm good. Thank you. I don't know what.
If I could make one follow-up on Mr. Pacini's report. Just to follow up, it was also very encouraging that Jack Frankie, as our student representative, participated on that Zoom call as well. Give him experience to meeting our elected officials and the decorum that is required for that, and he did a wonderful job. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ancona?
Thank you. I don't have any trustee advisory report, but I did want to ask I know somebody had asked me what the last day to pick up the petition was for the trustees.
I think that's the 25th, March 25th.
March 25th. Okay, so that's tomorrow.
That last day or first day?
Is that the
Oh,
first?
you can begin picking up on the 25th.
Okay, so the deadline's in like April something.
April 19th.
There you go,
Okay.
April 19th.
Thank you. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you.
Mr. Frankie?
Thank you. So last week, the South Country community, we all came together. We truly came together in recognition of the 1-year mark since our school shut down in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Hosted by the high school student council, kids and families drove through the back parking lot and placed a candle to light up the words "Beauport Strong" in front of the tennis courts. I would personally like to thank everyone who attended the event, as well as the faculty members who contributed their time for the event. I know I saw Mr. Trent and Mrs. Felice there. It was so good to see everyone in person. And keeping up with the theme of Beauport Strong, the high school is planning a Beauport Finish Strong goodie bag for the 4th quarter on April 12th. The student council will be creating an Amazon wish list so community members can donate items to our school event. More information will be sent out through social media by the end of this week. Also in April, The Bellport High School will be running their yearly Academic Jeopardy Challenge, hosted by school teacher Mr. Feltman, who is retiring this year. Each class will have a small team of students, and the Jeopardy game will be live streamed to their peers in their classrooms. This event is always a student favorite, and I'm thrilled to see my friends battle it out upon the stage. It's quite apparent that the senior class will win this year. If you guys have noticed, the Bellport High School sports have been in the local papers lately. Huge congratulations to our full sports teams, especially our football and soccer teams. Great work, and can't wait to see where the season goes. The senior class board and the building administration, as well as the advisors, are in the beginning stages of planning a senior prom this year. The prom will be held in the Bellport High School courtyard on Friday, June 11th, with a rain date of Saturday, June 12th. From talking with building administration and the senior class representatives, it sounds like it's going to be a really awesome event. So I'm really excited. And keeping on the theme with seniors, I'm really excited for the senior awards and recognition ceremonies, as well as the senior graduation, as that's right around the corner. Graduation will be held on June 25th, and it will mirror what took place last year, but it will give students the opportunity to be presented with their diplomas on stage individually. The senior award ceremony is still in planning, and more information will be sent out as seniors and their families at a later date. And the Bellport High School Music and Arts Department is pleased to present Now Hear This. This virtual musical rehearsal has begun for both in-person and virtual students, and the final product will be streamed May 21st and May 22nd. I got the chance to listen to vocal warm-ups in the auditorium, and I must say, it's really nice to hear students singing again, and I can't wait to see this production. And finally, 277 students from our district, grades 3 to 12, partook in virtual NISMA this year. Huge congratulations to my peers who participated. It's really crazy to think that even during a pandemic, music brings people together and heals the world. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to repeat the comments about Evening of Excellence and the football game and the afternoon out on the football field on Saturday. They've been well covered by both Dr. Gianni and Ms. Felice. But I did want to point out with regard to Evening of Excellence that there was the 4-person string group that provided music at the beginning of the session, and it was lovely. It looked like they were in the library performing, and that it was really nice to be able to see them providing the music for the evening. It made it really nice. And I think, Mr. Frankie, you'd mentioned the NISMA concerts. I had the occasion to see a couple of those going back a couple of weeks, and again, it was extraordinary. Some of the students were doing it from home. Others were present. For the middle school, for example, it looked like they were in the cafeteria, but they clearly were very involved in their music, and looked to me like they really were enjoying what they did, and it was a performance that was not causing them stress. There is, I think that's all I have to add to any reports right now. And I think that brings us now to the budget presentation, does it not?
It does, and thank you. And just give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay. So our first item for discussion, well, actually with the omnibus, it's our last item for discussion. This evening is our fifth in a series of budget presentation, and it is a presentation on staffing. I will be making this presentation along with support from Mr. Briggs and wrapping up with Ms. Costa. And I will begin. So when we look at staffing, we look at it in terms of personnel by functional activity. We have four broad areas of functional activity for staffing. That's administrative staff, elementary staff, secondary staff, and non-instructional staff. Our administration staff is made up of those at central office, building level administrators such as principals and assistant principals, and then district-wide administration who has responsibilities throughout the buildings, and those are mostly our directors. So in terms of administrative staffing, we are projecting the elimination of one position as the central office data administrator. That person is currently sitting in that role as an administrator on special assignment. And our plan is to repurpose and have that administrator fill another vacancy within the district. So we are showing an administrative staffing decrease of 1.10 overall. Next, we have our elementary staffing projections. What we do when we look at projections, we make them based on current or March enrollments. The district has elementary guidelines of 25 students per class in K through 5. And what we like to say is that sections split whenever classes all reach at 26. But quite honestly, our numbers are well below 25 at this time and have been for years. You might find occasion that a section may approach 24 or 25 due to enrollment changes, but that's generally where we have only a few sections in a building and it's difficult to split those classes. Our enrollment projections and grade level sections are reviewed throughout the year. So this is a snapshot of today and what we feel our needs are, and then through the summer, and then we make adjustments along the way as we review those grade level projections. So we take a look at South Haven Early Childhood Center first. Those of you who are familiar with the center, it is staffed by a combination of school district teachers and employees and what is called CBOs, or community-based organizations. Currently, South Haven staff are fulfilling 3 sections, and NIS, community-based organization, is filling 3 full-time sections. This projection for next year is suggesting that we outsource all sections to a CBO, thereby saving 3 positions at that early childhood center. And that's why you see -3 here at the bottom. Clearly, we don't know what our enrollments are, but we do believe we will be able to support more full-day opportunities for our families using this method at a significant savings to the district. Moving on to Brookhaven Elementary School, and I'm sorry, I should have explained what these tables look like for you at first. So in the top half of the table, you see our current numbers, and in the bottom half, obviously, you see our projections. Here at Brookhaven, of course, and the other schools as well, you'll see the grades levels down the left, the current enrollment or projected enrollments. And then at Brookhaven, you'll note that we have general education sections, we have dual language sections, and we have integrated co-teaching sections, or sometimes known as inclusion sections. So we're projecting no overall change in the number of sections in Brookhaven next school year. However, you will see that there is a change in that currently there are 10 gen ed sections. Next year, there'll be 8. In terms of bilingual sections, we're projecting an additional 1, so there'll be 7 to 8 there. And we're projecting 1 additional integrated section at Brookhaven. So it still all balances out for a total of 24 sections. So overall, there's no change at Brookhaven in terms of full-time equivalent positions. Moving to Kramer Elementary School. Kramer Elementary School is a little different in that we are projecting a reduction of 2.0 staff members. And that is simply a result of a large third grade moving out. You see we have 103 youngsters in third grade now. They'll be graduating or moving up to Frank P. Long and being replaced by a smaller grade. And then we also have a very small first grade, which will be going to second grade. So that's why we are projecting 2 less sections at Kramer Elementary School. And as you will see on the right side of these tables are the projected average class sizes that we anticipate. And if you recall, we're using a guideline of 25. So our average class size is still below that number. Burn Crits, we are projecting no change at Burn Crits. You can see there's 14 sections for the school, while the sections move 4, 3, 3, and 4 this year to 4, 4, and 3, 3. The staffing remains the same, and there's no sections there, no changes in this building. And the average class sizes remain from 20 to 24. Moving on to Frank P. Long Intermediate School. We are showing no change in overall sections there as well. However, you will also remember that we began dual language at Frank P. last school year. You see that section right here. That section will move to the 5th grade, and then one will come into the 4th grade, but it balances out because, of course, kids are kids. They're in one program or another, so there's no change in terms of the number of staffing that will be needed or the number of sections that'll be in that building. Frank P. Long is relatively unchanged with regard to enrollment as well. So this is taking a look at all of those tables in one table in terms of classroom teacher summary. South Haven, we have a -3, Brookhaven, no change, Kramer Street, -2, and then no change in both Crits and Frank P. Long for an overall decrease of 5.0 elementary classroom staffing. In addition to our classroom staff, you heard me mention integrated co-teaching. Oops, I am sorry, I went a little fast there. We have integrated co-teaching at both Brookhaven and Frank P. Long. We are projecting 1 additional section at Brookhaven, which you may have noticed in the last Brookhaven slide, and no change at Frank P. Long, for an overall increase of 1.0 staffing for integrated co-teachers at the elementary level. In addition to our students that may participate in the integrated setting, we have special class program teachers. Those programs are throughout the district, and we are projecting only a change at Frank P. Long, where we are projecting an additional 2 teachers needed at Frank P. Long for special classes. So that's an increase of 2.0 at Frank P. Long. In addition, we have resource program teachers in our buildings. They are not full-time in any building. They generally are shared between buildings. So as you can see, we have 0.5 in each, when we are projecting 0.4 in our K3s and 0.8 at Frank P. Long next year. While there are changes building to building, overall there's no change in staffing for our resource program teachers. In addition to classroom and our special education teachers, we have other elementary teacher projections. As you can see, that's art, E&L, health, library, math, music, physical education, reading coaches, reading, speech, visually impaired, social worker, psychologists, and our behavior specialists. And we are projecting no change in any of those areas for next school year. Now, this is the table that lets you look at all of the things I just said on one piece of paper. And you will see that we are showing an overall decrease in total elementary teacher staffing of 2.0. In addition to elementary, we have staffing projections. Staffing projections at the secondary level is a little bit more challenging, just simply because it is a period by period schedule rather than a classroom or section schedule. We do the same here. We have projections are based on March course enrollments, as well as requests coming in. So our staffing projections at the secondary level are tentative, but our experience in doing this for years and years allows us to be able to make a good attempt at what we will need, but also allowing for contingency in the event we need to make adjustments as numbers become more real. So when we look at staffing, first we'll look at Bellport Middle School and its enrollment. You'll see we do have a declining enrollment throughout the district, actually. I don't know, I think a few board members were on the board when we had BOCES do our 10-year study, which suggested to us that our enrollment was going down. It is going down, and it shows that in this slide, as well as staffing needs moving forward. So we have 56 less students expected at Bellport Middle School next year. Looking at the high school, it's not as impacted with a total of only 19 less students. But as you know, that as these numbers move forward, the high school will begin to feel the effect of the declining enrollment in later years, as the middle school is now. So when we take a look at secondary projections, we take a look at courses and certification areas of folks that are participating or providing instruction in those courses. First, sixth grade, we are projecting the need of 2 less sections at the 6th grade level at the middle school. And I'm not going to go through every one of these, but I'm going to highlight some of the larger ones. English 1.0, Math 2.6, Science 2.1, and ENL 1.4. You may be aware that ENL is serviced in different levels for students. Currently, our projections are less of a need in the ENL area, but quite frankly, I think that is one area that might change as we move along, because it typically does as we move through the staffing process. Overall, on this page, we have a subtotal of 10.8 reduction. Moving to the next page, which is art, music, health, physical education, special education, speech, social workers guidance, our cadet corps program. We have a total of 13.2 cumulative. So bringing our 10.8 over, we have a 13.2 reduction in staffing at the secondary level. Now, keep in mind that sometimes this will be full positions, but most times it is pieces of positions. You heard me say in the beginning of the presentation, we're going to look at staffing in terms of full-time equivalents, okay? So 1.0 is full-time, and clearly 0.5 is half of full-time, and that's how we look at it. We certainly try to mix and match pieces along the way, so we are not accessing staff unnecessarily and using folks as much as we can, but sometimes that is unavoidable due to certification area. So when we took a look at secondary staffing, teacher summary, all those tables in one place, you see a reduction at Bellport Middle School of 4.7 and Bellport High School is 8.5 for a total overall decrease of 13.2 staffing. In addition to our instructional staff, we have non-instructional staff. However, let me point out that our teaching assistants are instructional. Just for the conversation and the ease of presentation, we do include them on this slide, but our teaching assistants are instructional staff and certified folks. We are projecting a 0.4 decrease in teaching assistants at this time. Aides and monitors, no change. Clerical, +1. Buildings and grounds, +2. Responders, +3. Nurses, +1. And computer lab assistants, +2. For a total of non-instructional staffing as -13 in this area. So when you take a look at all of those slides together and in terms of functional areas of activity that we began with, administrative staff, we have a 1.0 reduction, elementary staff, a 2.0 reduction, secondary staff 13.2, and non-instructional staff a 13.0 for a total of 29.2. I also want to add that we have begun, as you know, talking about what remote teaching and learning might look like. So we took an unusual step and included 5 full-time equivalent positions in the budget currently. So we may be able to plan for what that may look like in terms of additional staff. I also want to point out that while these reductions are great, and I'm not going to deny that they are not great, they are not affecting program. We're not cutting program. It's simply a result of enrollments other than the change at South Haven, which does, I don't believe it's going to affect the quality of the program, but it is going to be a change, and a lot of our reductions are coming from South Haven, both on the non-instructional side and the instructional side. And I believe that is all I have, and I am going to turn it over to Ms. Costa, but first I want to give the board an opportunity to ask any questions with regard to my presentation, because before we get into the numbers, and I see Ms. Hayes. And you're muted, Ms. Hayes.
Thank you. With regard to South Haven and the UPK, I'm just looking at the enrollment numbers for currently. There's enrollment also at an off-campus CBO, and I don't know if the enrollment numbers.
Oh yes, I think you're right. I think they are missing from there. Bellport Methodist.
Right.
They're still running, right?
To my knowledge, yes.
Yeah. I know they closed up shop once, one of the classes. Yeah. Okay. So that's a miss.
So
That's not going to affect our the presentation in terms of numbers and FTE projections, though.
No, but I raise that only because some number of students who are presently being served, and I think it's good that we know how many students are having the benefit of this UPK grant.
Okay.
So that's one. And the other question is there anything in these staffing projections dealing with summer school?
No, because those are not full-time equivalents. Those are additional salaried positions. They're not placed into the budget in terms of full-time equivalent positions.
Okay, and is funding for summer school handled differently?
Well, it's in the budget, but it's not. It's like I said, they're stipend in terms of the number of classes that are taught. So it is funded differently, but it is funded through the budget.
Okay, it's not grant money.
No, well, there are portions of the grant for the special education summer school, yes, but not the general ed summer school.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Ms. Felice.
Thank you. We should look into, on a federal level, I do recall reading, and I didn't forward the article, but I'll look for it. There was some talk that the federal government was going to be funding on a more permanent basis the pre-K program. So we need to look at that. Because I mean, that program has been the pride and joy of our district, and I would not like to see it be privatized. So that's first. I know we have to dig more into the budget about that, but that's my initial reaction. Also, when you speak of cutting laboratory, computer lab techs, when we are in the throes of remote teachers, Chromebooks, remote learners, and assisting teachers with transmitting those programs, how do we explain away cutting those two positions?
Yeah, that's a good question. I wish I would have mentioned it earlier. So the move to one-to-one devices is really, there's different needs in technology. Right now we have 6 lab techs throughout the district, but we are now reviewing what that might look like, and we do want to increase support for not only our teachers, but also our parents, and also repairs that need to be made on the technology that we now have. We believe that we can put together a plan with the need of 2 less lab techs. Currently, we're really not operating the laboratories. The initial purpose of the lab techs were, hence the lab tech with the one-to-one devices. And we are actually looking at this to be able to improve our technology support for what we have and what we plan to have.
All right, I'm curious, as I'm sure the rest of the board is, in seeing that plan. Also, you mentioned the BOCES enrollment report that was presented several years ago.
Mhm.
Is that currently listed on our website? And if not, can it be?
I don't know. I know it was, but if it's not, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, let's get that up. And then also for the board members who hadn't seen it, well, actually, if we can just redistribute it to the board so we can refresh our memories about it.
Absolutely.
We'll be referring to it apparently throughout this presentation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay, I am going to turn it over to Ms. Costa, who's going to talk about the money. Ms. Costa, are you there?
I am.
All right.
Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So thank you, Dr. Gianni. And so Dr. Gianni's presentation on staffing, we're now going to move that forward into the numbers. And many of these slides will be familiar to you, but the numbers will be updated. So here is an overall picture of our expenditures in the 4 major functional areas of the district: admin, curriculum, transportation, and benefits and debt service. Our overall budget has changed due to the staffing presentation tonight. Our total budget is $145,450,000. That represents a 5% increase. The last time we met, our expenditures for the district were about a 6% increase. So just so everyone's aware, and will continue to change through the process. Again, this is an overall picture of our financial challenges. It looks at our gap and our revenue versus our expenditures. As you see, our gap is still, with tonight's staffing presentation, still almost $15 million gap that we have. Oops, sorry, I didn't mean to go so quickly. There's been no changes to revenues at $130 million, and our expenditures, as you saw, are at $145 million. That is a gap of $15 million, and we still do not have decisions yet regarding designated fund balance and reserves for the district, and that will be a decision that is forthcoming in a meeting soon. So closing the gap. Where are we? So this is a slide that looks a little bit different than the past. Highlighted in yellow right here is where we started the budget process on February 24th. Our gap was $16.8 million. At our last meeting on March 10th, there was a change to the gap, and the change was all revenue related. And I just want to explain this table to everyone just because we'll continue to see it to the rest of the budget process. There are 3 ways our gap will change. Column A over here are fund balance and reserve decisions made by the board, and that will change. That will bring down any fund balance and reserves that we appropriate as a district, will bring down our gap. Any revenue changes, plus or minus, will change our gap. And any expenditure changes, if it's a reduction in expenditure, it'll lower our gap. And if it's an increase in expenditures, it'll increase our gap. So at our March 10th meeting in purple here, we had made 2 changes to revenue, if you recall. One was for the tax cap. We had to make a change because of one of the exclusions that actually increased our gap. And we made another change to our transportation aid estimate after I had spoke to the state and done some more granular work with that. And that brought our gap to 16.5 million as of our last meeting. And tonight, related to Dr. Gianni's presentation on staffing, these are the categories of items that were discussed tonight: admin staff reduction, elementary staff, secondary, non-instructional, the addition of 5 remote teachers, and there's also a slight placeholder for an addition for transportation RFP. If you remember in a prior meeting, I mentioned to the board that our athletic and field trip busing is out to RFP. The RFP has actually come in, and we're seeing rates, unfortunately, that are higher than we are currently paying. So right now there's a placeholder. By next week, we'll have more final information. And that brings our gap to $14.9 million. If you actually notice, it equals the prior slide, this $14.9 million that was on the prior slide. This is just the details of how we got there. And that's where we are right now. We did reduce this gap by $1.9 million in total from where we started on February 24th. And then our big picture that we continue to talk about. Here is our gap, 14.9 million. It's changing and it's evolving. And we continue to talk about that we need to advocate. We did meet with our elected officials, our Senator White and Assemblyman Stefano. We talked about some of the areas that we thought would help us on state aid. They continue to be federal money supplementing us and no service aid block grant, and that Long Island gets its equitable share. We continue to have a united message on those things. And on the tax levy side, we continue to advocate for more reliable revenue in the sense of floors that we can have predictable revenue in the future. And we actually showed them what a floor of 2% and 3% looks like. We showed our elected officials just to show them how that affects us. And we are against any changes to STAR commitments. And we would like the state to consider exclusions for things that are pandemic related, PPE costs, all the additional remote learning costs and technology and COVID expenses. And we were able to have that message with our elected officials. It was a very productive meeting. So where are we now? What's next? We anticipate state aid numbers out April 1st. Our elected officials did acknowledge that it may be a couple of days delayed, but hopefully we get something relatively timely. And for this year particular, we expect information on the rescue funding $1.9 trillion federal package that was passed for the country involves funding for schools. We expect additional information on that soon. Fund balance and reserves, amounts to appropriate. We will discuss that. I believe that's on schedule at our next budget meeting. We will discuss amounts to appropriate. And our tax levy, the board will entertain conversations to stay within the cap, or override. And those are our next steps in the budget development process. And that brings us to where we are tonight. These are the meetings that have happened already, including tonight. On April 7th, we will meet for a revenue and expense update. And hopefully by April 7th, we will have more information to present from the state. And we have 2 meetings after next meeting, April 21st, where we adopt the budget. And then May 5th, where we have our budget hearing, and all of that culminates with our budget vote on May 18th and our trustee election. And that's where we are.
Any questions that require the screen show? Oh, gone now.
Sorry.
No worries. That's all right.
I can bring it back up.
No, that's all right. Any questions on, anyone need to see a screen?
I don't need a screen. Okay, rough math says to me that the total budget as we sit here tonight is about 5% greater than what it was last year. And is that attributed to salary increases that are part of the contracts and increases in transportation and other things that we basically don't have control over?
It is, we usually speak about, like, at the last presentation, we went through all the components that make up our gap. And yes, they start out at actually the highest item, I'm remembering them off my top of my head, are benefits, followed by collective bargaining agreements, followed by PPE, technology, special ed changes, and other contract facilities changes. We're seeing increases to cost there, and other contractual changes that partnerships with vendors that we have, related service providers for our students, things like that. But yes, that is what makes up, and it also what makes up our gap, in addition to just expenditures increasing, is a reduction in our revenues. That is the equivalent. When our revenues decline, it's the same as our expenditures increasing. We have nothing to support those increasing expenditures. You need revenue to support. So whether your expenditures are increasing or your revenues declining, both of those factors contribute to a widening gap.
Basically, we need this approximately 5% increase to continue to provide what we've provided this year.
We really need closer to a 7 or 8% increase because our revenues declined from the prior year. So we need to make up the 5% expenditure increases, and somewhere we need to also make up revenues declining.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Trent?
Yes, on the summary page, can you just give me a roundabout estimate about of the total savings and the reduction of the 29 staffing positions?
Yes, I can give you about $1.5 million, but I'm going to actually take 1 second to give you the exact number. $1,563,000.
Okay.
And just for clarification, Mr. Trent, it actually includes the addition of 5 remote learning teachers. So it's that full number.
So repeat the number again, please.
Okay, the reductions were, I will talk about them in 2 buckets. The reductions were $2,347,000, but then we added in 5 remote learning teachers for $525,000. Those 2 numbers come to a net change in staffing of $1,563,000.
And this includes.
Hold on, didn't you say 2 million? I'm sorry, Mr. Trent, but didn't you say 2,347,000 to start?
Was to start, and then we added in $525,000 for 5 remote learning or contingent teacher positions.
Okay, so I see.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Mr. Trent, go ahead.
That includes staff at South Haven, correct?
It includes the staff contractual costs and their related benefits.
Okay. All right.
Ms. Felice, I think, had her hand up. Ms. Hayes.
Oh, I'm sorry, doing my math. Miss Felice.
Thank you. Could you just go back to, I must have missed it, or it was missed in the presentation. The projected expenditure slide page on my PowerPoint, it's showing page number 25.
Let me share, I will share it.
Did we go over that?
Yes, that was the first slide I began with. And actually, hang on 1 second. You're talking about this slide, correct?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so with respect to this slide, my first question is, what was our hiring totals this year versus retirement? Because with the increase in curriculum, it seems like we had an excessive amount of rehires, unless that was all contractual. Could you explain why that number is $2.6 million of an increase in curriculum?
So that was That was all contractual increases.
It was all contractual. It was, so we had a significant number of retirees last year versus hiring. So versus, you know, when we hire new employees, they're hired at a lower rate and they build up over time. But that was all contractual for what we have currently. Okay. In the slide previous to that one, in slide number 20, no, not that one. The next slide, the financial challenge.
This slide?
Thank you. So with the $14.9 million gap,
Yes.
was the budget, was the surplus from last year applied to this figure?
No decisions have been made as to designating fund balance and reserves to date.
Now, you said that we're going to see some of those numbers. As I recall, we see each year the comparison year over year of what our surplus is, and then what we use from that surplus to plug that gap. Will we see that extended review in the next presentation?
We did it in the first presentation. We can clearly,
I thought we saw it, and I thought we were going to see it again tonight, and I should have asked beforehand because I did go through the slides beforehand, and I just made the assumption it was going to be there, and it wasn't. So do you have that off the top of your head, what we used from our surplus for the 2021 school year?
Well, that's
Yes, it's right here. We use right here, it's column 2, which it's either the first column right here or the second column. We use $5,550,000. We designated $4 million in fund balance. We used $950,000 in reserves, and we used our debt service excess funds to the tune of $600,000. These three numbers add up to $5,550,000.
So that was the surplus.
That was the use. So that was the use, Ms. Felice, not the actual surplus.
Okay. So you have you won't know that until the next presentation?
Well, the surplus last year when we closed out our budget, I am remembering this number off the top of my head, but it was a $1.8 million increase to our fund balance last year at the end of the audit.
All right, I have a few more questions that I was writing down as you were going through, so just bear with me.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. It was a $2.8 million increase to our fund balance overall at the end of the last audit.
Okay, all right. With these numbers, did we have a significant increase with our BOCES expense? I'm just trying to get at, it just seems like there's.
It wasn't, we had a significant increase in enrollment, but remember BOCES is on a, what's the term you use, Ms. Costa? It's an average, it's a 3-year average. So it's not hit. The impact isn't immediately hit. It's paid for down the road. So while we are paying a lot of money for kids that go to BOCES, I wouldn't say it's a significant increase.
Okay. All right. With respect to the audit committee, and it's unfortunate, we did have an audit committee meeting scheduled for this week that I had hoped to attend. Did the auditors point out to the audit committee any structural issues with our budget and our finances?
No, the audit committee that's scheduled to meet, that was will be rescheduled because we met with our elected officials. That was our internal auditors, and they look at process and procedure. Our external auditors are really the ones who opine on the representation of our financial statements.
Thank you. And I'm glad you brought up the external auditors because that was going to be my next question. This is a significant budget, and we knew this year was going to be troublesome because of what Dr. Gianni mentioned about our enrollment is declining. We didn't know how the pandemic was going to affect us, and we never want to look at layoffs, and we only want to look at staff reduction as a last resort. So I'm going to ask of the board that we engage, a special assignment with the external auditors to look over the budget and the finances, because we're looking at reducing our staff 30%. I think we owe that extra look to see just where we stand with our budget. And before we exercise these cuts, we're talking about cutting 30 personnel. We're talking about privatizing an entire center that we were extremely proud of. And I would just ask that we look at doing that special engagement so we can get a closer look before we make these decisions on what we have to do with this budget.
That normally within the purview of external auditors?
Well, the external auditors work for the board, and we're looking at a budget that's significant here. So I don't think it's out of order. I'm sure there's probably a cost to it, but I think it's a cost worth making because we're going to disrupt lives. We're going to disrupt classrooms. It's just something that I think that we need to look at in going forward. And also, in the beginning, the rest of the executive board, the Board of Education, were not at the audit committee meetings, so we weren't able to participate in what was happening. It's just something I think would be an extra due diligence considering what we're facing here. And I bring that out to the board. I realize we lost a lot of our board members here tonight on this meeting. So due to family emergencies, I don't want to minimize that there were issues, but perhaps we can bring that up to them. The ones going forward.
I just caution the board. Listen, I have no problem having external auditors look at that. I don't believe that's something that I know they've never done it while I was here, but I just caution the board is time is not on your side. We have to put a budget together. And I was hoping to get some further direction from the board tonight on where you may want to go, where you may want administration to look, because we do have a significant gap. Yes, it's true that we don't know where the state is going to be, but clearly we do need to make some additional reductions. And absent the state's information, we're in a little bit of a tough situation right now.
Well, in my opinion, the board can't make that decision tonight because we don't know what we're looking at as our full reserves, what we have available to us. The state did give boards flexibility to use reserves to plug their budget gaps. I realize those actions are only one shots and don't take care of the overall budget going forward. But we don't have those numbers in front of us right now. And to go forward, again, we also haven't faced a budget that's as dire as this one in my experience on the board. So that's why I think that we should do our due diligence and just take a closer look and see what they can put together for us. They were going to meet with us on Monday. Perhaps we can get something that can be put together because, and I'm sure we're not going to be the only district that's asking them this question. I'm sure every district is facing the same. And I want to make sure that we look at absolutely every turn before we just look at slashing positions. We also spoke about the social emotional well-being of our students and our families. And the only way we do that is with personnel. And I don't see how we can ignore that before we make a decision.
I'd just like to comment. I share your concern about lost employment positions, but I wanted to comment about the UPK issue, just because the history of that was it was grant funded, and under the terms of the grant when it went into place, the state required a minimum of 10% to go to a community-based organization. And the reason for that is it recognized that when the grant funding came in for UPK to school districts, it could put some of the private nursery schools out of business. So there's a history there about why CBOs were used. And the use of a CBO to provide all services for our UPK students, as is being considered in this budget, does result in a savings out of regular taxpayer funded school monies. So I think we should continue to look at that. I also think that if I would like to have the administration assure us that the staffing projections that have been presented will enable us to meet the needs of the students, given the possibility that because of the pandemic issues, there may be a need for more guidance counselors or other people for the students to have contact with. And that, that is something for the administration to weigh in on.
I don't know if you want me to weigh in now. I can tell you that these are our best projections at this time, and we believe they will support the programs that we have and the children that we have and all the needs that we currently have. But as I mentioned earlier, these are projections. We continue to review and look at those as we move through the process. And that's why we look at things in terms of full-time equivalent, not necessarily who. Because those full-time equivalents move around in different areas to be able to better support the needs of the community and our students.
Dr. Johnny, but you said you were looking for direction.
Well, yeah, because we have a gap, we still have a gap, and I want to know the pleasure of the board with regard to additional cuts, no cuts. Things for administration to do and further look at with regard to reductions. We have a significant gap, and I don't anticipate getting that much of a gap from the state.
So you're looking at a $15 million shortfall as we sit here tonight.
Mhm.
And further, where could there be further cuts other than through increased class size and reduced staff? And that is not something that I think, I don't want to think about that because I'm worried about the children when they come back in September and having, boots on the ground. And so I don't want to be cutting adult staff members that could be available to them if needed. Is there anywhere else to cut funds?
Well, I mean, sure. Last year we eliminated equipment. It's not eliminated this year because you can't continue to eliminate equipment because we do need equipment to provide the programs that we have. There have been times when we cut back on supplies. Honestly, you're talking about nickels. When you want to make significant reductions in your budget, it's real unfortunate, but you're talking about people. That's where the money is. So any further cuts or programs, what are you going to look in terms of programs? I said at the outset, or maybe at the end of my presentation, the current staffing projections are not affecting any programs we offer to kids right now. Yes, it's true, we'll be delivering the South Haven program differently, but I don't anticipate that to be a lesser program as a result of that.
You're cutting about 29 positions, and
Sure.
that's only
But again, remember, we're following the guideline. We're still below the class size guideline at the elementary level. These cuts are really a result of a declining enrollment and a lesser need in these areas. It's not, we haven't cut any program. The next step would be to start increasing class size to the absolute max. You probably get another couple of teachers there and closing sections. I mean, that's not what I want to do. I'm not thrilled in doing what we're doing. However, we have a significant gap. We do have a staffing guideline, and we are just trying to follow that guideline.
Yeah, I get that, but with those decreases, you're only saving $1.5 million. Now we're looking at 7% budget gap. After this step, how do we close that gap? Is I'm trying to see how that happens.
Well, the choices you have before you, I think, are cut into program, look at reserves further, or possibly piercing the cap, because we are locked into an increase based on the tax levy. Given the pandemic, given the financial climate, given the revenues that were lost and not given, we don't have the money to pay the bills.
So, so when do we talk about the revenues or the tax cap? When do we have that conversation?
We have it right now. I mean,
Oh.
it's a little difficult not knowing where the state is going to land. Hopefully, our next meeting we'll know, right? The next meeting's the 7th. It's due the 1st. Our legislators told us the other day they don't anticipate it being on time, but it didn't sound to me like they anticipated being a week late either. My only request is any guidance you can give me to move forward in preparing this budget. I don't know what that might be. I know we're all in a very difficult situation right now. I know nobody wants to make cuts. I saw Mr. Pacini have his hand up, Ms. Hayes. I don't know if.
And then after that, I have a question.
Yeah, a couple things. I guess and I apologize, my little laptop just died, so I don't have the presentation in front of me. But we, in the past, we used to get at the beginning of the process, the line by line, everything up front, right? And we had the last couple of years budget plus encumbered, everything else. And it's kind of hard, to kind of go back now and piece it together based on what we've gotten. But my point is, one of the places when we were in this situation, not that we've been in this exact situation, is, and what I haven't seen is what the funding levels are for the reserves, right? We haven't seen, correct me if I'm wrong, have we seen how much money we're funding and based on the past few years actuals and encumbered numbers of, say, unemployment insurance, we're self-funded there, right? Those kinds of contributions to those balances. Have we looked at that yet?
We have looked at that. I mean, we could certainly send that out again to everyone. And we're, like Ms. Costa said, we're gonna take another look at that next time we meet.
Yeah, I guess my point is, like, it's different. We're not in person. We used to keep the book, right? So I could go back and look at it. So if you could just reference, maybe I guess I can go back and look at the calendar.
No, I think
and take a look at it. But
we'll just send it out. We'll send the piece out.
I mean, because that's really where when we're in a difficult situation like that. I mean, I think it's a job for the board to kind of peruse each line item and start questioning. Not to say that the administration hasn't, but in the past, there's been situations where, we could live with funding certain revenues a little bit lighter for a year or so.
I think if I'm following what you're saying, we've been having to put aside money for things where we are self-insured, like the unemployment insurance.
That's one example, sure.
Okay. And I remember having this discussion some time ago, and it seemed to me that the likelihood of ever having claims submitted that would consume the amount that we were putting away seemed minimal. So I'm wondering if there's a way our business office could look at those numbers again and see if there's any way that we can safely not have to put away as much as we have been.
Yeah, so let me speak to that, because over the years, what we have done, there's an amount of money that you do build into the budget so you can build fund balance. Okay. When I first got here, that was at a huge level, and it was into a couple of years that we finally realized that. At least I did, with the different business managers that we had. So over the years, we pared that down because, quite frankly, we were taking money from the taxpayers we shouldn't have been. So we pared it down to a reasonable spot. Right now, we are very light in terms of funding our fund balance in terms of this budget. That's where we are right now. So we don't have those big pockets that you always grab. It's accurate that we have some money that wasn't spent last year that Ms. Costa spoke about, and I think Ms. Felice was questioning. But we need to remember, you know, your reserves are like a bank account, right? It's one-shot money. We're talking about funding a program, and with reduced revenues and increased expenditures, we cannot continue to kick the can down the road. We have to address it. Hopefully we'll get some money from the federal government and the state this year. I expect it's going to be one-shot money. And it might be able to get us out of the hole that we have this year, or maybe it's going to be money that has to be spent over a few years. I don't know. But the sad fact is we do have to address the revenue and expenditure situation that we're in right now.
If I may, we've got the tax cap. This is all within the tax cap. If we were to determine that that we need to pierce the tax cap in order to raise the funds this year and to maintain our programs and our class size, that requires a 60% approval of the budget, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
What happens if we don't get 60% approval?
Then we have to, you could put it up again, and if it fails again, then you go to contingency.
And the contingency would be what?
Be the same budget that you have this year, and I don't want to put Ms. Costa on the spot, but I think it'll be pretty bad using the same money for different expenses the following year.
So it would deprive us of the roughly $5 million net increase that we have in funding available.
Oh, yeah.
If we did that. So we would be trying to run our program with about $5 million less than we had this year to do it.
I'm not going to weigh in on that
if
because
I'm following the arithmetic.
yeah, I'm going to defer to our business person. I don't want to weigh in on those numbers.
I mean, it is a full calculation, and I'll do an estimate of that calculation, but in overview is the levy can't be larger than the prior year's levy. And there are exceptions, just like the tax cap formula is large in 8 steps, but just high level, the tax levy cannot be more than, if you remember, our levy only increased by $793,000 this year. So that's the increase of our levy. Doesn't cover almost none of the increases we have. It covers nothing. So your levy can't increase by more than last year's amount. And then there are other specifics you have to have. You can't have any equipment. Your administrative component of your budget has to be within a certain percentage compared to the prior year. And each one of those steps in the calculation bring you a little further down, down the line, but that's the overview of it.
Ms. Felice has her hand up.
Ms. Felice.
Thank you. One of the asks that we made of our legislators at our Monday night Zoom meeting was to consider the 2% tax cap and the formula that Ms. Costa just referenced. There's an 8-step formula, and 2% really isn't 2%. One of the asks we made of them was we wanted reliable revenue sources so that each year that 2% cap fluctuates, so that we can so that can be the floor. 2% could be the floor, not the ceiling. And so that was one ask. We don't know how that's going to turn out until we see the state budget and what they're going to do. The second ask that we made, which was also significant, was not to penalize districts with piercing the cap if we are restricted in piercing that 2% cap, but to not make it a 60% majority, make it a simple majority. So that if districts want to support the increase for the programs, for maintaining the programs in the classroom and class sizes that they have been accustomed to, that we can do that with voter approval. So we still have those questions out there from the state that have yet to be answered. And we don't know what the state is going to realize. But what Senator White did say in conclusion with our meeting was she expects more money will be coming to the districts than we currently are anticipating. So there's a lot of unknowns out there from the state that I don't know if we should go forward with looking for more cuts. And Mr. Trent made a significant point when he asked for the cost of the staffing reduction comes out to what, just about $1.6 million. So in a $15 million budget gap, it's not as high as we thought. So I don't know where else we would go. We'd have to cut half the staff if you wanted to realize the $15 million budget gap. If that's the way you wanted to make up the gap. And I don't think that's the direction we want to go in.
We can't run the district like that. We need this. We need the staff. We know what we need in order to provide the programs that we've been providing. We know that the programs we've been providing are giving results. You know, if you look at how our students are doing.
Our community comes out each year with a 70% approval of our budget. So we are doing something right that they approve of.
And I'm just wondering, I'm just going to throw it out as a sort of a hypothetical. What if we did decide to try to pierce the cap? Do we think we could get the approval that we need from our community? It's a big ask, particularly given the stresses that have been placed on every single family during the last year, but it would be an opportunity to get us to continue the programs that we're offering, and it would put us in a position for subsequent years so that the foundation aid would be increased. So Ms. Costa, you're nodding, and I know you can explain this better than my layperson's attempt to do it, but if we can get the foundation aid floor up higher for us, that will benefit us every year after. So I don't know, I'm just throwing that out as something.
Yeah, you're using the word foundation aid, which is interesting, the term that the state uses for its base aid, base student aid, but I understand what you mean. You mean get the base up of our tax levy, and you are correct that if the base of that tax levy increases, even in a one-time attempt, it is forever notched up at that higher level. And just for the board's edification, just so you're aware, every 1% increase, remember our levy is only increasing 1.23% is what the tax cap calculation tells us to stay within the cap. Every 1% increase to that 1.23% is about $625,000, just for for conversation purposes. So if the district went forward with 4.23%, they would approximately get $625,000 times 3. That comes to $1,875,000. So that's kind of just that would permanently notch up the tax levy base forever to that number.
And I just have one final follow-up because I know Chris had his hand up. We're also mindful that in even considering piercing the cap, we also don't want the state to penalize the district because those districts eliminate the star reduction, and we don't want to see that happen. So just that was my final follow-up.
Is it my turn?
Cheney, your turn.
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple of thoughts, you know, and Cheryl made a comment that, you know, I used to think early on, you know, you get 70% pass, you know, could we pierce the cap? And we've thought that before. But one thing I've learned is that when you try to pierce the cap, the no votes come out and vote. You know, they stay home when you're under the cap. And that's something we've seen. And, you know, it'd be interesting to see what this year does. I think it came out in Newsday a few hours ago. There are 4 or 5 districts thus far who've decided to pierce the cap. What's interesting is that some of them are good sized districts. Usually it's the small districts out east that try it. But I believe Wantagh was one, and another larger, I think Three Village is going to try to pierce the cap. But the other thing we really have to be mindful of here is a lot of people out of work, and we're talking about increasing taxes. And something like, you know, piercing the cap and raising taxes in a difficult economy when people are out of work brings out, you know, it brings out the no votes. And, you know, to the point of the conversation we had with the legislators, I mean, the chances of anything happening in regards to the tax cap or the vote override in this budget cycle are between slim and zero, because they're not new asks, right? They're asked this every year. And it was actually, I think by design, that the tax cap has created a squeeze every year, and it's only going to get worse because costs and contractual costs are going to continue to rise at a faster rate than the tax levy is. So, I mean, the rubber's meeting the road right about now at the same time of the pandemic. So I would caution the board in having that conversation about piercing the cap, because I'd be really, really worried about what comes next. And there's nothing worse for a board member. I lived through it once. When you try to pierce the cap and it fails, man, you don't sleep much the next couple of weeks before that next vote, because if it does, the contingency budget is, you know, you're talking about canceling kindergarten and busing and things like that. It's a scary scenario to think about. So, I mean, it was just that. So I think, you know, we need to, and I think this is what Dr. Gianni's asking, if I'm understanding, is we really need to start looking at cuts. It's hard, and I hate cutting people as much as the next person, but wherever we can on wherever we're funding some of the reserves and things like that, whatever else it is we can do, nothing really can be off the table right now, unfortunately, in this situation.
Mr. Trent?
Ms. Costa, if we go ahead with the staffing reductions, what are the chances that we will ultimately have to increase the cap anyways?
Well, the increasing of the cap is a decision of the board to go forward. And if a board makes that decision to move forward with piercing the cap, it isn't, you did not pierce the cap unless 60% of your voters say okay to that decision. So
Yeah.
that is a decision of the board to move forward. If you do not decide to pierce the cap, you go forward with your budget, and you're really asking the public to vote on your tax levy. That's really what they're voting on, that their tax levy, if it's within the cap, they say okay, and you need a simple 50+1 votes to move forward with that. The spending plan is what supplements the tax levy decision that the public's making.
So I guess what I meant was, when you have the staffing reductions and you have that 7% budget gap, what are the chances that we will be able to fill that gap without touching the cap?
Well, that's a decision that the board makes as to how we fill the gap, whether we fill the gap through using more reserves, cutting programs, a combination of all of those items. And then if the decision's ultimately made, they want to go forward with piercing the cap, that would be a decision that you would make.
So if you don't make those reductions, Mr. Trent, you add another 1.5 million to the gap.
Yeah, everything that's added now is increasing your gap. Everything from this point forward.
And what do we have in reserves that could be applied?
Why don't we, I think what we'll do is send you a line by line, and we will send you a reserve report. So you have it well ahead of the next meeting.
You know, our next meeting is, hold on just a minute.
It's the 7th, right?
Yes, April 7th.
So that's it's 2 weeks. And of course, next week, school is closed. So does that take next week off the table for having a special meeting to have a thorough discussion here about this?
To be honest with you, I think to have a real thorough discussion, we do need to hear and see what additional monies may be coming from the state. Because then we will at least see what the gap truly is.
So that really does bring us to our next meeting.
It really does. And listen, I think this discussion has been healthy already, even though we really didn't get anywhere, because I got the message very clearly that you're not looking to cut any more staff and you don't want to affect program. So we need to start looking at other avenues that we may be able to reduce expenditures or add revenue. And we can certainly do that. And I think by giving you all the reserve report to see where we are, that'll give you some information so we can have a healthy conversation in our next meeting. And hopefully we will know some information prior to the next meeting to be able to get that information to you as well.
Okay, so, and then our meeting after that.
Isn't that adoption?
I thought so. So
yeah.
that's why I'm feeling a little anxious, because
yeah, well, the good news is our next meeting's workshop, right? So there's no nothing. It's just workshop.
Okay.
And we're gonna, to use the phrase Mr. Pacini used, that's gonna be where the rubber hits the road. We're gonna have to work at that meeting because we'll have a lot of information at that time. And you may need to schedule another meeting prior to budget adoption after that. That's
so the 14th.
Well, I don't know, but I could certainly see that being possible, that you'll need.
Well, I would ask everybody to pencil in the 14th just in case, so you don't schedule something else that Wednesday in case we need it in order to get this budget together. Now, going back to Ms. Costa, and I don't expect you to be able to answer this tonight, but you gave numbers for the increase in tax levy, but do we have any idea how that would translate to your average homeowner?
Well,
I could give you an estimate of that.
We could figure that out.
Okay. You know, if we're, well, I'll let you come up with some numbers on that, just so we know.
Okay, I think unless there's anything more on that, I think we're done with the agenda other than your closing. I think we closed everything out.
I think so too, although I think maybe there was there an acknowledgement that Mr. Trent needs to give to a donor?
I do not know. I do not know.
Let me just check that.
Yes.
You know what? We accepted a donation from Independent Living Systems. So I normally, I think Mr. Trent expresses the appreciation of the board for any donation. So that one, we'll just red flag that. Is that all right? So we know that's done. And then if there are any closing remarks, I think we've all, well, we'll wait to hear back with the data that you're going to give us, and we'll each be giving some thought to what we think. And in the data that you give us, it will include the current status of all reserves and what would be available without stripping us of the obligation to meet certain, expenditures to keep the buildings in place, for example. So thanks, Ms. Costa. You've got your work cut out for you. And okay. All right, anybody else with any closing remarks? I don't see any. Who wants to make the motion to adjourn? Mr. Trent, and it's seconded by Ms. Felice. All in favor, the 4 remaining board members agree that it will be adjourned.
Good evening, everyone.